The chandeliers of the Holloway mansion glittered like frozen stars. Laughter echoed through marble halls, clinking glasses and piano music filling the air, the perfect image of wealth. But in the middle of the celebration, at a long golden table surrounded by balloons and gifts, sat a small girl in a white dress. Emily Holloway, 10 years old, beautiful, silent. Her parents, Richard and Grace Holloway, billionaires known for their global tech empire, smiled for the cameras. But behind their eyes was a hollow ache. Doctors had called it selective mutism. Therapists said she might never speak. The world pitied them, but money couldn't buy the sound of her voice. As the candles flickered on her cake, guests began to sing, "Happy Birthday." Emily just stared at the flame. Tears filled Grace's eyes. Richard forced a smile. But his hands trembled under the table. He blew out the candles for her, and in that instant, somewhere deep in her heart, Emily wished she could scream. Days passed like slow rain. Grace spent every morning with Emily, showing flashcards, books, toys, trying to reach her. Emily would only draw. Quiet scenes of trees, birds, and something she called the gate. Richard, on the other hand, drowned himself in work. He couldn't handle the pitying looks, the headlines, "Billionaire's daughter, the girl who never spoke." Every time a specialist failed, his pride cracked deeper. He'd rather build another company than face what money couldn't fix. That night, Grace whispered to him, "She's not broken, Richard. She's waiting for someone who understands her." Richard sighed coldly. "Then let's pray that someone speaks her language." He didn't know how. Close those words were to coming true. On the other side of the Holloway estate's iron gates, life was very different. In the dusty back streets of the city, Jamal polished cars with his father, earning coins to survive. He was 12, smart, curious, and endlessly kind, the kind of child who smiled even at strangers. One day, while chasing a small rubber ball near the mansion's outer wall, he accidentally threw it too hard. It rolled through the open gate and disappeared into the manicured garden. "Jamal! Don't you dare!" his father warned. But curiosity burned too strong. He slipped past the guards barefoot, sneaking across the soft grass until a deep voice froze him. "Hey, you don't belong here!" A guard grabbed his arm. The boy trembled, stammering, I just wanted my ball, sir." Before the guard could drag him out, a small face appeared at an upstairs window. Emily. Her eyes met his, and for the first time in her life, she smiled. Emily pressed her hand to the glass. Jamal, confused but bold, raised his hand back. That simple reflection, two palms separated by a pane of glass, felt electric. She giggled soundlessly, pointing toward the ball in the grass. Jamal grinned, picked it up, and tossed it gently toward her window. It bounced off the wall. She laughed again, silently but joyfully, clapping her hands. From the security room, a guard noticed the scene. He reported to the head of staff. Within minutes, Richard heard, "Sir, there's a boy from the lower district near the garden. He seems to be interacting with your daughter." Richard froze mid-meeting. His face hardened. "Remove him immediately!" As the guards escorted Jamal out, Emily ran to the window again, her hands pounding the glass, eyes wide with panic. "Emily!" Grace called from behind. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" But Emily didn't move. She kept staring toward the gates, where Jamal turned back one last time and waved, and then something unbelievable happened. Emily's lips parted. No sound came out, but her breath trembled like the start of a word. Grace gasped. "Richard!" I think she tried to speak. Richard looked out the window, just in time to see Jamal disappear down the hill. "That boy," he muttered darkly. "Keep him away." But deep in Emily's heart, a spark had been lit. A silent voice was starting to wake. It had been a week since Jamal was thrown out of the mansion grounds. But he couldn't stop thinking about the girl behind the glass, the one who smiled without words. Every morning before school, he snuck back to the tall iron gates, leaving behind small handmade toys he carved from scraps of wood. A bird, a flower, a tiny heart. By the next day, they were always gone. He never saw her, but he knew she took them. At her window, Emily kept the toys in a box under her bed. Each piece became a secret treasure, proof that someone, somewhere, saw her as more than the silent girl. Grace noticed the toys and whispered to her, "Are these from your friend?" Emily nodded, smiling softly. Grace's eyes filled with tears. For the first time, her daughter had understood a question. At therapy, Emily began to hum softly. The therapist leaned forward, stunned. "Grace, she's responding to emotional memory. When shown pictures of faces, happy, sad, angry, she only reacted to kindness. Every gentle expression reminded her of that boy by the gate." Meanwhile, Jamal's father noticed his son leaving early every morning. "Where do you go, son?" "Just somewhere quiet," Jamal smiled. He didn't dare tell him. He didn't want his father punished again for being poor in a rich man's world. That afternoon, while Grace watched from the balcony, Emily tapped her fingers on the window frame, a rhythm Jamal had used to signal hello when they first met. Grace's heart pounded. "That boy didn't just reach her," she whispered. "He woke her." One afternoon, rain began to fall softly. Emily, drawn by something she didn't understand, slipped out the side door of the mansion, barefoot and quiet. She ran toward the giant oak tree near the outer wall, the place she'd seen Jamal last. And there he was, soaked, muddy, trying to fix his old bicycle chain. When he looked up, his eyes went wide. "You came out?" She nodded shyly. Her hair clung to her cheeks, her white dress stained with mud, but she didn't care. Jamal handed her a small wooden bird he'd carved. "It's for you." "Because you looked sad that day." Emily held it close, then pointed to herself, mouthing the word Emily. Jamal smiled. "I'm Jamal." For the first time, her name had meaning. From that day, the two met secretly beneath the oak tree every afternoon. Jamal taught her how to whistle using her fingers. She couldn't make a sound, but her attempts made him laugh. And that made her laugh silently too, tears in her eyes. He drew on scraps of cardboard to show her words: sun, tree, friend, voice. She repeated them in her mind, her lips forming the shapes like prayers. They shared bread, stories, dreams. And though she never spoke, her heart shouted louder than words. That night, Grace found Emily sketching a picture of herself and Jamal holding hands under a tree. The caption was simple, drawn in childish letters, "My voice." Grace cried silently, kissing her forehead. "Oh, sweetheart." Maybe love is your medicine, but not every heart was kind. One afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the hills, the mansion's head guard noticed movement beyond the oak. Through binoculars, he saw the unimaginable, the billionaire's silent daughter sitting on the ground beside a poor boy. Laughing, he froze, unsure what to do, until Richard himself walked past. "What is it?" The guard hesitated. "Sir, I think you should see this." Richard lifted the binoculars. His jaw locked. There was his daughter, happy, alive, smiling. But beside him, a barefoot black boy in torn clothes, his face darkened with disbelief. "Get that boy away from her, now!" The guards began to move. Emily and Jamal didn't notice. They were busy drawing hearts in the mud. Within seconds, heavy footsteps thundered toward them. Jamal looked up. Emily's eyes widened in fear. "Run!" she mouthed, but it was too late. "Stop right there!" The guards' voices ripped through the peaceful garden. Jamal turned, startled, clutching the wooden bird in his hand. Emily froze. Her eyes darted to the mansion, and there stood Richard Halloway, fury radiating from every inch of him. "What is the meaning of this?" The guards dragged Jamal back. Emily screamed silently, pounding her fists against one of their arms. "Let him go!" Grace shouted, rushing out behind her husband. "Richard, please," but he raised a hand sharply. "Do you have any idea what this looks like? Our daughter, with a boy from the slums?" The words hung heavy, cruel, echoing across the rain-soaked grass. Emily trembled, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jamal looked up, terrified yet proud. "Sir, I didn't mean no harm." "I just—" "Silence!" Richard barked. You will never come near her again." As the guards threw him toward the gate, Jamal's wooden bird fell, snapping in half. Emily stared at it, broken, as the boy who brought her laughter disappeared once again. Days turned into weeks. The mansion felt colder than ever. Emily refused to eat, refused to draw, refused to smile. She sat at her window every day, eyes fixed on the empty oak tree. Her mother tried everything: songs, therapy, gifts. Nothing reached her. Grace whispered to Richard one night, her voice trembling. "She was getting better, Richard. You saw it. That boy, he was healing her." Richard slammed his glass on the table. "He was corrupting her. I will not have my daughter's name dragged through the mud." Grace's tears glimmered in the lamplight. "Then maybe it's your pride that's broken, not her." Richard turned away, but her words cut deep. He looked out the window at the distant oak tree, haunted by his daughter's silent tears. Emily's silence grew darker. She stopped responding entirely, not even to Grace. At breakfast, she stared blankly at her untouched plate. The therapist's voice echoed faintly. "Children with trauma sometimes regress when separated from emotional anchors." Grace held her hand. "Emily, please, sweetheart. You have to try." But Emily's eyes only filled with tears. She traced a tiny shape on the table with her finger. A bird. Grace's heart broke. She turned to Richard, whispering fiercely, "You've caged her again." "You can't build walls around her spirit." He said nothing. But that night in the quiet of his office, he found himself holding Emily's old drawing, the one where she and Jamal stood under the tree with the words, "My voice." For the first time in years, Richard felt ashamed. Jamal, meanwhile, refused to forget her. Each morning, he left small drawings at the mansion gate. Scenes of laughter, sunlight, hope. He signed each one. "From your friend, Jay." He didn't know if she received them, but he left them anyway. And though the guards threw most away, one kind gardener secretly slipped them to Grace. Grace hid them in Emily's room. One afternoon, Emily found them, a stack of pictures of her and Jamal under their tree. For the first time in weeks, she smiled faintly. Grace knelt beside her. "Would you like to see him again?" Emily's eyes widened. Then slowly she nodded. It was dusk when Grace led Emily quietly through the garden. Her heart pounded with guilt and hope. Under the oak tree stood Jamal, older somehow, thinner but with the same kind eyes. When he saw Emily, his mouth fell open. "Emily," he whispered. She ran to him, tears glistening. Holding the old broken wooden bird he had made, she placed it in his hands. He smiled softly, whispering, "We can fix it." As they began gluing the little bird back together, a shadow fell over them. Richard stood a few feet away, pale, furious, trembling. "Grace, what have you done?" The bird dropped from Jamal's hands and shattered again. Emily clung to Jamal's arm in terror, and Richard's voice thundered through the garden. "This ends now!" Lightning split the sky above the Holloway estate as rain poured in torrents. The once bright garden turned dark, shadows crawling across the marble walls. Richard stood beneath the oak tree, his tailored coat drenched, anger trembling in his voice. "I told you to keep this boy away." Grace tried to reach him. "Richard, stop!" "Please," but he shoved her hand aside. His eyes locked on Jamal. "Do you think this is a charity? That you can sneak into my life and fix what doctors couldn't?" Jamal stepped back, terrified yet defiant. "Sir, I just wanted to help her. She's my friend. You don't deserve to be near her." Richard roared, voice breaking through the thunder. Emily clung to Jamal's sleeve, her small body shaking. She looked up at her father, his face a mask of rage. And something inside her cracked. The rain poured harder. Lightning flashed again. Emily's lips trembled. Her breath came in gasps. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Not yet. The guards moved forward. "Take the boy out," Richard ordered. "Now!" Jamal stumbled as they grabbed him. Emily lunged forward, fists pounding against their arms. Grace cried out, "Richard, please! Look at her. She's trying to speak." But Richard's pride blinded him. "She's confused. This boy is a distraction. Thunder crashed, drowning his words. Emily screamed silently, her body convulsing with frustration and fear. Jamal was shoved to the ground. "Don't hurt him!" Grace shouted. But Emily's mind was a whirlpool. Fear, pain, rage, love, all colliding into one impossible moment. And then it happened. A flash of lightning tore through the sky. Emily's knees hit the mud. Her hands trembled. Then, "Stop!" Her voice ripped through the storm, raw, sharp, alive. Everything froze. The rain seemed to halt midair. The guards turned. Grace gasped. Jamal's eyes widened in disbelief. Richard stood like a statue, face pale, lips trembling. His daughter's voice, the sound he thought he'd never hear, echoed in the silence that followed. "Don't hurt him," she whispered hoarsely, voice trembling. "He's my friend." Tears poured down Grace's face. Jamal's heart pounded. He couldn't move. Richard fell to his knees. For the first time, his pride collapsed beneath the weight of love. Emily ran into Jamal's arms. He held her tight as she sobbed against his chest, whispering broken words between tears. "It's okay." "You spoke?" Jamal said softly. "You did it." Grace knelt beside them, weeping uncontrollably. Even the guards looked away, pretending to wipe their eyes. Richard approached slowly, rain dripping from his chin. His voice cracked. "Emily, sweetheart." She turned to him trembling, still holding Jamal's hand. "You were wrong, Daddy." The words hit harder than any storm. Richard's throat tightened. He fell to his knees before them both. "I know," he whispered. "I know." By morning, the story had already spread. Someone had recorded the moment. The little girl who had never spoken screaming her first word to protect a poor boy. News outlets flooded the mansion gates. Headlines read, "The girl who broke her silence for a friend." But behind the cameras, a quiet transformation took place. Richard sat by Emily's bedside, holding her hand. "You were brave," he said softly. "You taught me something no fortune ever could." She smiled faintly, whispering the word again, like a prayer. "Friend." He kissed her forehead and turned to Grace. "I have to make this right." The storm outside had passed, but in their hearts, a new light had begun to rise. Richard Holloway sat alone in his study that morning, sunlight filtering through the curtains, painting stripes across his face. The once proud billionaire now looked hollow, his reflection staring back from the glass window like a stranger. He replayed Emily's voice in his head. "You were wrong. Daddy!" Each word echoed like a wound and a cure all at once. The newspaper lay open before him. "The girl who spoke for justice. Miracle at the Holloway estate." The boy Richard had once called unworthy. A knock came at the door. Grace entered quietly. She placed a mug of coffee beside him and said softly, "You can still make things right, Richard." He stared at her, eyes glistening. "Can I?" "You already started," she said. "You just haven't finished." And for the first time, he nodded. Later that afternoon, Richard's black Rolls-Royce pulled up in front of a small, weathered community center, the place where Jamal's family volunteered. The locals gathered in disbelief. They'd never seen a billionaire's car parked here before. Jamal was outside, fixing a broken swing when he heard the engine. He turned and froze. Richard Holloway stepped out, not in his designer suit, but in a plain gray sweater and jeans. No security, no entourage, just a father with something to prove. He walked slowly toward the boy and said, "Jamal, I came to say I'm sorry." The entire yard went silent. Jamal blinked, unsure he'd heard correctly. "Sir, I treated you like you were less, like your worth could be measured in money. But you gave my daughter something I never could, hope." He extended his hand. It trembled. Jamal hesitated, then shook it. "She's my friend, Mr. Holloway. That's all I wanted to be." Richard smiled faintly. "Then let me be yours." A few people clapped quietly. Others wiped their eyes. In that small act, pride dissolved into humanity. Weeks later, Richard announced something that stunned the business world. The Holloway Foundation for Healing and Hope. a multi-million-dollar program dedicated to helping children with speech and emotional disabilities in partnership with Jamal's community organization. At the press conference, Jamal stood beside the Holloway family. Emily held his hand proudly. When the cameras turned to her, she smiled shyly and whispered into the microphone, "He taught me how to speak." "But Daddy taught me how to listen." Reporters fell silent. Grace wiped a tear. Even Richard turned away, pretending to check his notes as emotion filled his eyes. For the first time, the billionaire wasn't the story. The boy was. One afternoon, after the world had calmed down, Emily and Jamal sat beneath the same oak tree where everything had changed. She had a little book in her lap, a journal filled with the first words she'd learned to write. "What are you writing?" Jamal asked. "Our story," she said with a giggle. "The one where you didn't run away even when Daddy yelled." He smiled. "That's because I knew you were brave. You just didn't know it yet." She looked up at the sky, sunlight dancing through the branches. "Do you think people change?" she asked. "Yeah," he said softly, "when they finally see what love looks like." She closed the book and leaned her head on his shoulder. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. Months later, the Halloways hosted an event at the foundation, a gala celebrating Voices of Hope. Children of all backgrounds filled the stage, laughing, singing, reading aloud, voices once silent, now free. Richard stood at the podium, his voice steady but emotional. "We built empires of steel and glass," he said. "But this," he gestured to the children, "this is the only empire that matters, one built on compassion." The audience stood in applause. Jamal watched from the front row, pride glinting in his eyes. After the ceremony, Richard approached him quietly. "You changed my life, Jamal. I can never repay that." Jamal smiled. "You already did, sir." "You listened." Behind them, Emily ran up and hugged them both, her laughter ringing like a melody. As the lights dimmed, Richard looked out over the crowd, children of every color and creed, and whispered, "Maybe this is what miracles sound like. Fade out,